Welcome, everybody, to the June 16th, 2022 edition of Collect Our Cousins, Engaging White People in the Struggle for Full Democracy. I'm Karen Fleshman, founder of Racy Conversations and of the Collect Our Cousins LinkedIn Live series. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Quiet Rebel Tracie Jae. I created this LinkedIn Live series to help white people like myself become more effective in our conversations with the white people in our lives, to help us build an embodied anti racist white culture, in the words of Resma Menachem. White people, there are 21 million Americans, largely white, who believe that Donald Trump is the legitimate president and political violence may be necessary to restore him to office. We are frontline in this effort to turn the tide of our country and to expand the anti racist movement in our country toward the collective liberation of all people. So I am featuring in this LinkedIn Live series the people who inspire and teach me the most, which is why I'm so delighted that Tracie Jae is joining us here today. Hello, Tracie.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Aside from this persistent tickle in my throat, I'm great.
Oh my goodness. I hope that is all that it is, just a tickle.
Well, I have just recently recovered from COVID. About a month
Mm,
ago, I had COVID, and I managed to escape the full, biggest part of the pandemic, and then I got it a month ago.
mm,
So I'm sure that it's not that.
mm,
Um, However, occasionally, while you're talking, hopefully I don't have coughing fits um,
mm.
while I'm talking, but I'll just mute myself and cough and come back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for making time to do this, even as you don't feel 100%. I'm so grateful to you. And I'm also so grateful to you because we're coming up on the Juneteenth commemoration. And I know you have a lot of thoughts about this, and I'd love to hear what you're thinking about, how you're feeling, and just share with our viewers your viewpoint on Juneteenth.
Thank you for that question. Let me um, preface this by saying that I am a Texan. I, that's not always a thing to brag about because Texas sometimes gets the short end of most sticks, and we may be bringing that on ourselves. I own that. But my family has been in Texas for at least 5 generations.
Wow.
Um, and so Juneteenth has always been a part of my life, a part of my story. Um, and honestly, as a child growing up, it was just a reason to go to the picnic, right? We're having a cookout. Like I didn't understand the depth and breadth of why this day was so important. Not that the adults around me hadn't tried to explain it to me. I just we're food. You got me at food, right? I mean, it really wasn't until my I had my own children and they um, were involved in some programming that helped to explain Black history to them that I got a better understanding of Juneteenth, what it means, what it doesn't mean, um, and then as an adult, I was on the fence about it, right? Like, why are we out here celebrating getting the news late, right? Like the Emancipation Proclamation was written in 1863 in Texas. We didn't get the news until June of 1865, a full year and a half later, and we're celebrating that. Like, help me understand. why why we need to celebrate this, right? And when I would pose that question to other adults in my space, they would mostly say, we're celebrating freedom,
Mm.
period. Full stop. Right?
Pause. We are celebrating freedom.
Yeah. We are celebrating freedom. And it and that was enough for me,
Mm.
right? Yes, we are celebrating freedom. Okay, let's go. Let's celebrate freedom. Um, but then when I learned later that Juneteenth wasn't even the freedom, like it was freedom for a particular group of people, um, that came on the heels of some freedom that had already been given to, to a group of people, right? So again, Abraham Lincoln writes this Emancipation Proclamation. He declares that people who have been enslaved in rebellion states are now free. 1863. Um, Also, in the next paragraph below that, he says to those people who have just been released, now don't be violent.
Mm.
Make sure you're not causing any trouble.
Mm.
And only be violent in the cases where it may be self defense.
Mm.
And if you can, go ahead and stay where you are and keep working for these people for a reasonable wage.
Mm.
It's in the document,
Mm.
this Emancipation Proclamation that we give credit for the freeing of Black people.
Mm.
So you don't have to take my word for that. You can Google it. Go go look up the
Yes.
Emancipation Proclamation text and read it for yourself. Um, and then the 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 language is so specific that it is freedom for those who have been enslaved in rebellion states, which Texas happens to be one of, even though those people who were holding folks hostage in Texas were not the least bit interested in acquiescing to that written document.
Mm.
It took troops coming into Texas to deliver the news and to demand the release of these people.
Mm.
So that is another reason why Juneteenth, the celebration of Juneteenth, is important, right? It was because Texas was not giving up on this idea of holding people hostage, whether they knew that information or not. It took them being forced into this action
Mm.
to to take that action
Power concedes nothing without a demand,
without
as
a demand.
Frederick Douglass taught us so well. Whenever I'm wondering, why is this happening? I go back to that and also who is at the root of the problem is the people who profit from the problem.
Yes,
Follow
the
the
people who
money.
follow the money, honey, always. And so it wasn't until we get the 13th Amendment, which is was not ratified until December of 1865. So then still a full 6 months from the date we know as Juneteenth to the date that the 13th Amendment is ratified, which then states that it is illegal to enslave people in this
Mm.
country, except, because there's an exception in the 13th Amendment, right? Except those who have been committed of a crime, who have
Mm.
been convicted of committed a crime. So then the loophole still exists to make the possibility of slavery present.
Mm. And that loophole remains to this day, right? As
Absolutely.
we saw in Ava DuVernay's 13th about how prison labor is making Starbucks cups and Victoria's Secret. And here in California, they're fighting forest fires.
Yeah. So um, we live in a country that is built on capitalism and built on free labor. Um, and wherever we can still profit in that way, we still do.
And in
Um,
Texas, I think they were using prison laborers to farm.
don't get me to line about what people have been using prison laborers to do, but I would not be surprised by that. Um, but this idea of turning everything into dollars brings us back to this conversation about Juneteenth.
Mm, yes.
And um, I know that there were people in Texas actively fighting for Juneteenth to become a national holiday.
Hmm.
I am not one of those people. I am not of the mindset that Juneteenth needs to be a national holiday because it's not for everybody.
Hmm.
And what happens when you make it a national holiday is that everybody benefits.
Mm.
I had gotten accustomed to the being sort of special in that way, like being in Texas and having this date that really was just about us. It
Mm.
was about enslaved humans in Texas getting this message, albeit late, getting the message that we have been freed and celebrating that freedom. Um,
In
so
your
now,
family, in your community,
yes, yes,
together,
yes,
collectively.
together, yes. A day of remembrance, a day of
Hmm.
commemoration, right?
Yes.
Um, but now it is a federally recognized holiday, which means people are closing their offices. People are getting being off. They're getting paid to be off from work. All the people. Um, people are turning this into a way to make money. So we saw the quickly failed Walmart ice cream fiasco. I've forgotten which store it was now. Somebody in the chat might be able to tell us. Um, there was a store that was selling Juneteenth salad that was a watermelon salad. Like, and then there are people who are marketing T-shirts that say like, "It's the freedom for me." Who whose freedom exactly are we talking about?
Mm.
And so this idea that people for whom this day never mattered are suddenly um, able to benefit from this day and capitalize on this day, and in many cases make mockery of the day.
Mm.
And I'm not here for any of that.
No, no. I will tell you, Tracy, I lived in Texas for 5 years. And the last month that I lived there was actually June of 1997. And I was working for a grassroots nonprofit organization that served Latino immigrants. And some folks, um, okay, thank you, Gavin. We're getting the fact check. This Children's Museum of Indianapolis food court was going to sell the Juneteenth salad
Thank you, Gavin. I appreciate
to the
that.
children. Uh, some folks who worked at a community center in a Black neighborhood reached out to my organization because that neighborhood, a historically Black neighborhood in East Austin, was increasingly, there were lots of immigrants and refugees from Central America and other parts of Latin America who were settling in that neighborhood. And there was a lot of conflict between the longstanding citizens and the newcomers. And they had an idea, which I absolutely love, to organize a bilingual community celebration of Juneteenth. And they wanted us to partner with them to host this event. And so we did. And we had longstanding community citizens, residents, and the newcomers all together. We had music and food from both cultures. We had a spoken program where we talked about the history of Juneteenth and we translated that into Spanish. And we also had a spoken program about what was going on in Central America and Mexico that was causing people to come to East Austin. And we had a raffle and we had, we all sat down and broke bread together. I mean, it was like this really, it was such, I still resonate so much with that event because I think that is the real way to commemorate this. That is the real way to educate people about what Juneteenth means and to commemorate it collectively.
I think that before people rush into wholesale celebration, that there should be some wholesale education.
Mm,
Um, I, uh, I wish that we were more somber
mm,
about this moment in our
mhm,
history,
mm,
and I wish that we were um, more mindful about how freedom is relative.
mm,
Um, because even that day, all those years ago in 1865, the people were released, but to what? Um, Released with the instruction to continue laboring,
mm,
released with the instruction to not fight back, to not hold accountable the people who had harmed them for centuries before,
mm,
to sort of, turn the other cheek, turn a blind eye, just go on with your life like this never
mm.
existed. And we are still living in that space of going on with our life as if this never existed. Um,
Yes.
but it
I
exists.
heard Brian Stevenson speak, the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative, and he was
Hmm.
talking about how if you go to Germany, there are no statues honoring Nazis. The textbooks say Nazism was terrible. There is no, like, after the Holocaust, they put the Nazis on trial, convicted them of war crimes, and the entire society had a reckoning with who caused harm, who was harmed, who benefited from that, and paid reparations. And as a result, the historical record is clear. We never did that in the United States. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, let's let bygones be bygones. We wanted the black people to join the Union Army. If they had not been in the Union Army, we never would have won.
Right. Let me make a comment about Germany.
Mm,
Um, so, one of the reasons I think that Germany has been successful in moving their country forward in that way is because they have the example of what not to do from America.
mm, wow.
These things that happened to American blacks happened at a time where there was no wide wide scale media. There wasn't There wasn't much interference from outside nations. There was some, but not
Mhm.
much interference from outside nations. There wasn't a lot of pressure coming towards the United States for the crimes committed against other humans,
Mhm.
mostly because other European nations were also complicit and had done the same things and had benefited from the enslavement of Black people in America.
Mm.
Um,
That's where it originated.
exactly.
Mm.
And even after they outlawed it in their own countries, it
They
was
still
they were still
profited.
profited from the enslavement of Black people in America. And so Germany had America as an example. Um, Not only on the horrific side, because we know now that Adolf Hitler helped, wrote the Nuremberg laws based on Jim Crow.
Mm.
Um, but then on the flip side of that, when they come out of war and come out of the atrocities committed against mostly Jewish people, they know how not to treat those people going forward.
Mm.
But in America in 1865, we didn't have social media. We didn't have television broadcasting the horrific things that had happened. We also didn't have we had some abolitionists in this country for sure, but that was not the primary voice in the country, right?
Mm.
Because the primary voice in our country has always been white, male, land owning.
Yes.
That has been the primary voice.
And as mass media developed during the Jim Crow period, they latched onto mass media as a way of propagating stereotypes and encouraging. In fact, Jim Crow himself was like a performer, right?
Right.
Like a vaudeville performer.
Yeah, it was
Um,
minstrels based
yeah,
on minstrel shows. Yeah.
yes. Hold on one second because we have some really great comments.
Okay.
Dr. David Camp, one of my major heroes. I highly, highly recommend Dr. David Camp and his White Ally Toolkit. Interesting perspective on the holiday. There's always poignant trade-offs about making a community holiday go mainstream. There are upsides too, but energy must be put into managing the narrative, a dialogue like Karen is talking about now.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree that we do have to we have to manage the dialogue, and I think the people who are responsible for managing the dialogue have to be the people who for whom this holiday represents in the first place.
Pause. It is so powerful. Like, because you think about who are all the other folks who have benefited from the struggles of Black people, that white people killed Black people, right? To try and prevent these struggles. And then on on the coattails of Black people, white women get affirmative action. Other groups of Americans um, benefit. The immigration laws are liberalized. All of these things because of Black people's struggle. And because Black people don't control the narrative, this is, we never learn about this. So listen to Black people.
Yes, please.
Okay, let's see. We have another comment here. Tracy says, I agree the commercialization of Juneteenth detracts from the solemnity of the event.
Yes. Yeah, I mean we like a good party in
Yes.
America, right?
We like a day off
We
because
like a
Lord
day off.
knows we bust our butts in this capitalist society just to keep a roof over our head.
Yeah. But I also think about how long people have been asking for this holiday
Yes.
and the timing of the delivery of this holiday also gives me pause, right?
Yes.
Um,
Let's break that down a little bit.
so here we are at the height of a pandemic. Um, People are in the streets shouting from the rooftops about social injustice in a way that we haven't seen in the last few decades. Um, and this was the answer. Let's make Juneteenth a national holiday.
Meanwhile, police in 2022 are on track to kill more people than they did in 2021, which, of course, there is no even official record of that kept. That is just based on what we know from mappingpoliceviolence.org. So we're not going to do the substantive change that we really need to do. In fact, we're going to fund the police, fund them, in the words of Joe Biden, in the words of Eric Adams, mayor of New York City, et cetera, et cetera. The police budgets keep getting bigger and bigger, more and more militarization. And there's still no police reform legislation being enacted.
Not even just police reform. I mean, I live in Texas, right? So let's talk about accessibility for guns, um, and like that we are leaning into violence
We
in
are
a way.
leaving.
We are leaning into violence in a way that is quite American in its roots. Like the response to violence is more violence,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Except except when the people who might get violent look like me.
Mm. In which case, oh, no, 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 no. We
Yeah,
didn't mean for those people over
yeah,
there
yeah.
to
No,
own
no,
guns.
yeah,
We
no, no,
only
no.
meant for people who look like
Calm
me.
down. Can't we have a peaceful resolution to this? Like, why are you so upset? Why are you angry? Like, what do you mean? Why am I angry? Like, I woke up angry.
Mm,
And if you know me, people who know me in real life, right? Like, I don't lead with anger. That's not the driving force in my life. It's not the driving force in my energy. Um, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? I I I'm angry as a result of the things that have happened, not even necessarily to me personally, but to people who look like me,
mm,
to people who come from communities like communities that I know.
mm,
People who could be my cousins, because in America we don't even know,
mm.
right? Because of the ways that black families were separated during enslavement, hither and thither and to and fro. Who knows who I'm related to, right? So my anger, my fury is for the people who could be my cousins.
Mm. And if you're not angry, that means you somehow view Black people as deserving of that, or not worth feeling empathy for.
And also, let me just add that my cousins could look like you, Karen.
100%.
Right? Like I
We
talked
could be
about,
cousins.
we could be cousins. We I talk about being a fifth generation Texan, right? And my grandfather's grandmother, Molly, lived to be 100 years old. This is why I know her story, because there was a write up in the newspaper about her turning 100. My father was 7 years old when she died, but she was born enslaved in Texas,
Mhm.
and the person who is credited as being her father was the person who owned that
Mm,
plantation. Um, so when I'm doing my ancestry, and I did my little ancestry DNA thing and got all my data from the cloud or whatever, and I get these little hints from the ancestry people about, oh, we have a new person to add to your family tree, and it's somebody related to uh, to the DeBlancs. That was the family that owned my grandfather's grandmother, and so these could be my cousins too,
Mm.
right?
Mm. And I just want to say something to the white people who say, well, no one in my family owned slaves. I don't have anything to do with that. You know what? At least on my mother's side, no one in my family owned slaves either. But what they did do is benefit from the Homestead Act land grant. So my great grandfather comes over as an immigrant, obtains 160 acres of land in the 1880s. That land is still in my family's possession. It's where my mother grew up. It's the reason why she is a homeowner, why she got a college education, why I am a homeowner, why I got a college education. And although my great grandfather didn't own enslaved people, that land was the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Kiowa people. And he was allowed to get access to it because he was a white Protestant man immigrant. There were all these recently emancipated Black people in places like Texas who could have benefited from that land, but they were, if they tried to move or do anything to organize, they would be, white people would lynch them, rape them, oppress them. So even though my great grandfather didn't benefit directly from slavery, he benefited from being white in a way that was deliberately withheld. And so I, as his descendant, have an obligation to the descendants of enslaved people to make things right.
Yeah, I see. David has a question.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, also, oh, David has another question. Okay, yes, let's see. Okay, and then I'll come back to, okay. What are Tracie's suggestions to people, Black, white, or otherwise, about how to create productive conversations around Juneteenth, given that society has already made the perhaps regrettable decision to have the holiday? Thank you, David.
It's an excellent question, David, and I've been sort of grappling with that myself. Um, um, I think that the only way to have a difficult conversation is just to have it, right? Um, when we are creating spaces where we are going to acknowledge Juneteenth, and in Houston, there are a whole lot of them happening this weekend. There's wall to wall Juneteenth. Um, I think that it is important that we educate people in those spaces, right? So don't let people just show up to party, right? I think we need to be having an honest conversation about why Juneteenth is a thing. I think we need to be honest about what it is and what it isn't. Um, and if we're going to celebrate, it should be in that context, right? And I think that if nothing else, we can use this energy around Juneteenth to think about solutions for actual freedom, right? Because if we're going to celebrate freedom, it should be because we have freedom. And I don't know whose quote I'm about to butcher, but none of us is free until all of us is free. So, like, working actively toward the actual freedom of all people.
Thank you, Tracie. And I might add that for all of us who have benefited from Black people's struggles, to thank Black people for leading the way to our collective, to the extent that we have made progress against white, cis, het, male patriarchy, it's been because of Black people. And we need to thank Black people for that and learn that history too.
Yeah. You can thank Black people with your words, and you can thank Black people with your dollars. You can
Mm.
find Black businesses to support. You can invest in the dream of a Black person that you know. Like, um, we talk about reparations like it's unfathomable, and it's like this, big far-reaching thing, and people get real frustrated and scared when you start talking about reparations, because it's like, you want to take what I have, what I worked hard for, I built my life from my bootstraps, blah 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 blah. And reparations doesn't have to look like that. There are many ways that reparations can come, and I think the idea of Juneteenth should be one of those. That should be one of the ongoing talking points. How do we make amends to the people who were impacted? You want to celebrate the holiday? Go right ahead. But how are we celebrating? What change is going to come as a result of us acknowledging this holiday?
I want to touch on Megan Sheehan Dean's comments. Absolutely. Context is so important. When we think about Juneteenth as a federal holiday, we have to understand both what it is commemorating and the context in which the holiday was created. When we examine that context, it's so clear that so much more work needs to be done.
Thank you, Megan. I appreciate that comment. And I didn't say this earlier, but we know that Abraham Lincoln did not believe, as he stated himself, he did not believe that Black people should be part of this society. His wanting to abolish slavery was political. It was not about humanity. While he wasn't necessarily a supporter of enslavement, he did not think that Black people belonged here in this country. And he was one of the people who was like, okay, how do we get them out of here? Like, we're going to let them free. How do we ship them off? Where do we send them? Right? So we tout the greatness of Abraham Lincoln as the great emancipator, right? But his emancipation efforts were politically motivated. And bless his heart, he was assassinated because of them. Because the South does not like to lose.
No, we most certainly see that.
And the South has continued to benefit from the 3/5 clause and being able to count people as part of a person, even though they don't have any vote or voice. We could go down that rabbit hole. It would take us through.
Right. Yes. And how, it's not till 1965 Voting Rights Act that many Black people's votes were actually counted.
Yeah.
And then we elect a Black president and the Supreme Court's like, oh, we don't need that Voting Rights Act stuff anymore. Clearly, we have a Black president now. It's all good. And then these states immediately start enacting voter repression laws.
Yeah, which means that they had them already written. It wasn't like they drafted them overnight in a vacuum, right? They were just sitting there, dusting them off, waiting on the good time to use them. And I say they, like I don't live in one of those states, right? Like we. Right, which goes back to a point I try to make often is about voter apathy. Like the people who we elect by our voice or our non-voice make the decisions that impact us, right? And so there's a lot of people, particularly Black people, who say, well, I don't want to vote because it doesn't make a difference anyway. It's the system we have. You cannot uproot the system we have unless you're participating in it. So you got to get in there. We can maybe bust it up from the inside, but we cannot bust it up from the outside because it is controlling all the things we do.
Yes. And and voters of color and progressive white people make up the majority of voters. We're who popularly elected Barack Obama twice. You know, when we come out to vote, we sent Joe Biden to the presidency.
Yeah,
Okay.
when is the operative word in that sentence, Karen? When we go out to vote. And
Yes.
people, unfortunately, people who tend to identify as Democrats, and I'm just going to go ahead and say this out loud, tend to vote emotionally and only when we're excited. Like, Barack Obama was an exciting candidate. He checked a lot of boxes for people, right? He was charismatic and easy to look at and intelligent and
Beautiful family.
had a beautiful family. He was all the things, which if you're a Black person in America seeking the highest land in the office, you got to check all the boxes. You can't miss any box.
Brown Jackson.
Exactly. Yes. You can't miss any boxes. All the boxes must be checked. Right. And so, you know, we got excited. We got excited about this candidate. Like, look at he's all polished and shiny. Look what we got, right? So yes, we did that, and we did it twice. But because we did that, we also got complacent. And when we got complacent, people who did not have those same viewpoints, people who thought, oh no, we can never have this again, let us put in the polar opposite of this person.
Yes.
And take our country back.
Yes. Make America great again.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, so much to talk about. David says, here is a site for people who want to do their own part about reparations while society has its discussion about what we do collectively. Fund for reparations now.org. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, David.
So
in addition to that, I'm sorry, Karen, I don't want to cut you off. I just don't want to lose my thought. But in addition to that, like, also you can just look who's in your community, right? Like, you can make reparations where you are.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be labeled that, right? But that is it. That can be what it is.
Yes. So you have a challenge coming up. I would love for people to learn about this.
I do have a challenge coming up. In my work, often people will ask the question, well, what can I do? And sometimes the question is posed in a like actual curiosity, like, tell me, Tracie, tell me what I can do, right? And sometimes the question is asked in exasperation, like, this problem is too big, what can I do, right? So I get both sides of this question. So my challenge is the what can I do challenge. And it's like a bingo game where the goal is to get 5 in a row, right? And the 5 columns represent the human acronym in my human-centered equity framework, which stands for honest, urgent, meaningful, accountable, and nuanced.
Love that.
And so you can, the challenge board is available on my website right now. You can use the challenge board however you like. There's no fee to participate in the challenge. If you would like to win some prizes from me, that option does also exist. And so the instructions for that are on the site. And you would just submit as you go, right? You'll complete your items and submit as you go.
What is your website, Tracie?
My website is quietrebellife.com.
quietrebellife.com. Okay, I am posting that up. We have another comment here from David. Oh, let's see. quietrebellife.com.
Yes.
Okay, so go on there and do Tracie's challenge. And while you're at it, do you have a PayPal or a Venmo or something?
I do. I have all of those things. My Venmo is Quiet Rebel, I think. I have to look. I don't want to. I don't want to tell you wrong. Hold on.
Yeah, don't send it to someone else.
Um, but also, so the challenge is free to participate in. I really want to see your feedback. I want to see the things that strike you, that move you, the things that you're going to go do, right? Like this is all of this is about doing something or learning something. Some of the squares on there are just questions, right? They're not. There's nothing for you to actually do. It's just something for you to learn, right? So I would really love to know what you learn. And if you want to take it even a step further and participate in community with people who are actively doing the challenge, then you can join our group, which there's a fee for that. But my Venmo is Quiet Rebel Life, just like my website. It's
Quiet Rebel Life.
Yep, just like my website.
Okay. Rebellife.com.
No, just Quiet Rebel Life. Like
Okay.
When you go to Venmo, it's at Quiet Rebel Life.
Thank you so much. We did have a comment here from David. Given that only 55% of folks vote, we all need to learn conversational strategies for persuading people to vote. I have done a project called the Voice Project, voters organizing to influence critical elections. People can find instructional videos on YouTube. Yes, I'm telling you, if you want to learn how to have powerful conversations with white people in your life, highly recommend David. He is a PhD in urban development and an expert in like how do you build consensus in a community about what needs to be done. And I have learned so much from him. Megan Ratcliffe, thank you for joining us, Megan. I loved your vulnerable LinkedIn post there. And please Venmo Tracie for sharing so many gems with us this morning. We really appreciate it. To conclude, Tracie, if you could wave a magic wand and get white people to either start doing something or stop doing something, what would it be and why?
Oh, such a big question. I'm going to borrow from my own work and answer this. So we were talking about communication earlier, and I also have communication strategies, and so I will share this one. And I think that if we all did this, not just white folks, if we all did this, that the world would be an easier place to live in. So the strategy is love first, always. And love is an acronym. I use a bunch of acronyms in my work. Love is listen with your heart, own your own biases, venture into unfamiliar territory, and expect the best.
And why do you think that love is so important in this conversation?
Because if we start there, there's no place for us to go but up.
Thank you so much, Tracie. That is so rich. How can people connect with you? Tell us about your programs. How can people participate in what you do, and what do you specifically do?
So most days I describe my work as being a racial equity coach. And my work in the world is creating incremental and organic shifts to the status quo, so no matter what that looks like. And my website is quietrebellife.com. That's the easiest place to connect with me, the easiest way to find out about the work that I'm doing. I have the challenge that starts today. So that's a fast way to sort of get acclimated really quickly. But then there's also a program called Own Your Shift that the next round of that begins August 1st. So I'm excited.
Own Your Shift?
Own Your Shift.
I love that play on words.
which invites people into a 3-month commitment to work with me, both one-on-one and in a small group, looking at this human-centered equity framework and how we can own our own shift.
Excellent. Tracie, this has been such a robust conversation. I'm so grateful to you, and our viewers are so grateful to you. Listen, thanks for this session. Thanks for this important session. I love, and I love human. Thank you, Tracie Jae, for your talents. Thank you, Tracie. I am so honored, and I hope that your commemoration of Juneteenth is meaningful and human and full of love. And sending you so much love for joining us here today.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, join us here next week. What is that, June 23rd, for the next edition of Collect Our Cousins. It's every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. See you next week, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Tracie.
Thank you.